All right, welcome everyone. It's so excited to see you. I'm a little bit distracted, but that's okay. That's kind of, what I do as the addiction navigator for Tigger House. And, addiction never sleeps and we never know when someone's going to reach out for help. So right now I'm helping someone in Texas, trying to get them a ride to treatment and also helping someone in New York. So a little bit of back and forth and it's never seamless transition. So don't mind me. I'll be all over the place tonight, but that's okay because it's not about me and we have an awesome guest speaker. So welcome to our latest Student Alliance Speaker Series from the Tigger House Foundation. Before we get into today's topic and introduce our guest, I just want to remind everyone to follow us on our social media platforms. We do have a lot of new posts going out and things that we really should be sharing and liking and commenting on and just showing your support. We've really had some great information go out recently. So I think what we should do is start with quick introductions. We do have some new people on tonight, which is very exciting. So I'll just start with Carla, who's my #1 screen.
Hi everybody. Carla Scarabino, Chief Development Officer of Tigger House. Very excited that as we keep going with the speaker series, more and more people join on. And I think it's been a great way for us to connect. Carly, I wish you good luck with those 2 people. Let us know if you need anything, but it's awesome the work you're doing. And I'm gonna pass it over to Amy.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy Thomas. I'm the Assistant Director of Development at Tigger House Foundation. I echo everything that Carla just said. I love that every week when we come on, there's all new faces and more people on. I love this. I hope you guys are getting a lot from all of these sessions. So thank you. And Jamie, we're super excited to hear what you have to say tonight. Let's go to Kaylee.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaylee Reynolds. I am a college student at Brookdale currently, and I am one of the future speakers for this event.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I pretty much signed up for it because I wanted to see what Jamie was going to talk about and see how she formatted her
love
talk.
it. I love it. Such a great idea. Thanks so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Jane, we're going to skip over you for now. Michaela.
Guys, happy Wednesday. I'm Michaela and I am one of the ambassadors here. Who's next? Robert.
Hi, I'm Robert. I'm a junior at RFH and I'm a co-president of the Student Alliance.
Awesome. Just pass it on to next.
Oh, Jaden.
Oh, Jaden was having mic problems.
Yeah.
Should I just, okay, Kathleen.
Cool.
Oh, hi, I'm Kathleen, and I'm a junior at Trinity Hall. And I'm not really sure who the next person is. I don't know if mine's in like the same order.
No, that's okay. Just popcorn. Just pick.
Oh, just pick. Okay.
Yeah.
Christina. Wait, I can't see that. But yeah.
Perfect.
Hey, hey everyone, I'm Christina Henderson. I'm an ambassador at Tigger House. So happy to be involved with such a great organization and continue to help raise awareness for addiction.
Hey everybody, Bar Henderson, an ambassador at Tigger House. So glad to see everybody on tonight. It's awesome. Thanks for coming in. Love it. Keep inviting people, as the more the merrier. And any little nugget you can take away, all the speakers that are coming on, they all have really great messages. And they're, even if it's a half-hour talk or something, there might be one thing that you walk away with in the night that makes it all worth coming for. So thanks for coming, and I'm looking forward to hearing everybody tonight.
Awesome. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Good.
I'm Michael. I'm an ambassador as well. I joined about a month ago, and I will say I've really enjoyed being here so far. And Jamie, I want to take the time out to thank you for speaking with us. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. My name is Dan, and I'm a junior at CBA, and I'm the other co-president of the Alliance. I'm happy to be here today, and I also want to thank Jamie for coming out and speaking with us today.
Hey, Bridget.
Hey, what's up, guys? Hi, Carly. Thanks for all the work you're doing, Carly. Hang in there.
Good. Awesome. It's totally
Can you hear
worth
me?
it. Yes.
I know. Hang in there. I'm Bridget. I am a Tigger House ambassador. Psyched to be here. And just to reiterate Bart's point, definitely taking a lot out of these series. I'm getting just as much out of it, I think. So this has been great. Looking forward. Let me pick who haven't we? Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna. Thanks, Bridget. I'm a senior at Trinity Hall. Still getting used to that title. I was about to say junior, but I'm a senior at Trinity Hall, and I'm a member of the Student Alliance.
Awesome. Hey, Matt.
Hey, I'm Matt, and I'm also a junior at CBA.
Cool. It's good to see you. Mary?
Hi, I'm a sophomore at Trinity Hall, and I'm a part of the Student Alliance.
Cool. It's good to see you. Jaden, are you able to talk to us?
I think we missed Ella as well. Hi, Ella.
Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Ella, and I'm a junior at Middletown North, and I'm like really new to all of this, but it seems pretty interesting. So I'll just see what you guys have to offer.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome.
Very cool to have you join tonight. All right. So let's see. We're excited to introduce our guest speaker, Jamie. And Jamie, I am just going to have you take it away. But Jamie is a registered nurse with 8 years, probably going on 9 or 10 years of diverse experience in public health, healthcare administration, and consulting. She has her BSN, RN, and now your MPH, right?
Yep, as of August 2020.
Awesome, congratulations. Maybe she'll explain a little bit what that is, from University of South Florida. So that's a very exciting recent accomplishment for Jamie, and she has many more to share with us. So all you, Jamie, kick it off.
Thanks, Carly. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. So as Carly mentioned, I have a pretty diverse experience. I think I remember being in high school and college and listening to people talk about their career, and it kind of was like, this is the road to be X, Y, and Z. Like, this is how you become a doctor. This is how you become a lawyer. And I really, when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I did not have a straight road. I had like 10 different roads, and there was bridges and tunnels, and it was very different. So I kind of wanted to offer that unique perspective, because I don't think everyone's career and life goes in a straight line. So I kind of want to, but sometimes it ends up okay. So right now I'm a public health nurse consultant with the United Nations working on COVID-19. And I also work with the New York State Department of Health doing COVID-19 response as a nurse. And then I also work with the Tigger House Foundation. So I'm very lucky. I have my dream career. Like, if you ask me, like, I have my dream career, I wouldn't change a thing, but that took a long time. If you had asked me at any other point, it would have been very different. I've always felt very lost. I think even in high school, I had, all of these different interests, but never really like could put my finger on it. I wanted to do 10 things all the time. My grandmother would always say, she's like, oh, it's like a buffet and you want every single thing on there. And you've got to pick one. And so it was always a challenge for me. Like, what do I want to do? I always felt like there was a lot of options, and maybe the options I wanted weren't available to me. So I kind of wanted to go through a couple of kind of how I got to where I am now. I'd love to hear from you guys. Does anyone know, like, what direction they want to go in, what career. Like, does anyone have like a real good idea? Yeah, Ella?
I'm actually like in the Monmouth County Vocational School for Nursing, so that's definitely something I'm interested in. I was just thinking about colleges and stuff today, so it's like it's kind of been on my mind. It's like kind of my dream to be a nurse.
Oh, that's great. Perfect. So please like jump in, ask questions, reach out. Like I would love to answer all of your questions. This is actually perfect. You're going to get, like, I had no idea what nursing was until I did it. Anyone else have like a specific interest or maybe thinking about something?
I mean, I'm planning on going into politics, probably something
Politics?
internationally.
International politics?
Yeah.
Ah, that's great. That's
Thanks.
great. Anyone else? All right, we could feel free to jump in too if it comes up later. Who's applying to college or working in that process now, or thinking about it, talking to your guidance counselor about it? Probably a couple of people. So I'm gonna pull up. I did a PowerPoint. I'm kind of gonna toggle between both, I think, because I have pictures. Let me do this. Here. There we go. All right, can you guys see that? Perfect. All right, so I went to Maryland the first time around, the University of Maryland. That's where I got my first degree, and I got it in public health. Back when I was in Maryland, no one knew what public health was. It was kind of like, oh, what's that? Now with COVID-19, everybody knows what public health is. Everyone knows what my job is. But back then, they were like, what part of campus is that? Like, do you do weight loss count? Like, what do you like? Do you want to be a coach? Like, no one really knew what it was. It was in like the smallest building and like as far off campus as you can get. It's funny because now it's such a big, now there's like an increase of like probably 50% of people who go into that field. Public health in general, it's what you're seeing with COVID, but it's also bioterrorism, it's immunization clinics, it's studying heart disease, and it's addiction research, it's addiction management. Public health really is a very all-encompassing field, which is why I found it so interesting. In high school, I was really interested in, I had a lot of different interests. I was involved in Art Honor Society. I wrote for the school newspaper. I was really interested in biology. I was kind of between writing and art, had all these different interests. And what I think I liked about public health was it kind of let me combine a lot of those into one. But initially I was thinking about going to college for nursing, and I chose Maryland because I really didn't know, and I thought I would have a lot of options because it was a big state school. I wish I could say I had a much more thought out plan, but this is the campus and I saw it and I was kind of like, well, that's beautiful. That's my decision. And I show you the pictures because I think sometimes, I was able to do some college visits, but I wasn't able to go see all the schools. I kind of had to rely on some of the pictures and what people told me. So if you guys have any questions about schools, after the presentation or during, please let me know, because I really I didn't even know a school. I couldn't imagine myself at a school like this until I went there. I'm like, oh, wow, like I could really see myself there. And then during Maryland, when I was there, so I was still trying to decide what I wanted to do. And along with college, with finding a career, there's a lot of extracurriculars you can get involved in. And one of the most, to be quite honest, I wish I had probably invested a little bit more time in the extracurriculars that were academic or in clubs and, like more sports and things like that. But I was very concerned with my social life in college. And it's one of those things that talking to people who are going into college, I would say, like, I wish the future, the me now could look back and say, I wish, spend more time, take more art classes, join more clubs. Because there was so much to do that I could have taken advantage of. But one thing I really did love was I did these alternative spring breaks. So a lot of people in college, you hear about college spring break, and it's a lot of partying. And my parents, I remember I called my mom and I'm like, oh, all of my friends are going to Acapulco. And she goes, if the next sentence out of your mouth is, can I go and will you give me the money for it? The answer is no. So she immediately shut that down. And I was like, oh, well, all of my friends are going. So I found this other program and it's called Alternative Spring Break. And it was, I think, $100 maybe. And they took you away for a week. and there was maybe 30 different choices, and you went and volunteered for a week, but it was pretty much everything paid for, all of your meals, your travel. They had different schools that would meet together. And this was something I had no idea even existed. I kind of stumbled upon it, and it was one of my coolest experiences of college, honestly, of my life. And so back then it was around Hurricane Katrina. There had been a bad hurricane in New Orleans. And so it was going to do relief. So gutting houses. We lived in a Walmart with like bunk beds in it. With, you know, kids from Cornell, kids from University of Maryland, kids from Texas, Kansas. I have a picture here. And it was just really fun. We wore hard hats, and it was so meaningful. And even some of the women in these pictures didn't even go to my school. And I'm still not only like friends with them socially, but they became work colleagues at some point. And this is, you know, almost 15 years ago. So I think it's really important. Like some of these things you think you're doing, you don't even know where the road is going to take you. But this was really meaningful. And then I did it again my senior year of college, and I went to Boston, and they had a program there where you were working with local drug addicted youth and students, young kids, I mean, 13, 14-year-old kids struggling in recovery from addiction because there was such a bad opiate problem up in Southie in Boston. And this man, Michael Dowling, started a program. He actually, this is an interesting story. There were a couple of kids, I mean, 11, 12-year-old kids that had grown up pretty rough. And he was building something on his space, and he found at night he had built like a marble sculpture, and he found the kids breaking it. And he was really upset because it was thousands of dollars he invested in trying to make his community better. And he caught them one night, and he runs after them, and he grabs them both by the shirt collar, and he looks at them, and he's like, I can take them to jail, and they're going to have the same life as their parents, you know, and things are going to go nowhere. He's like, but instead I looked at them and I'm like, do you want a job? You have to show up every day. I'll give you a job. It's $10 an hour. And he gave these kids, he taught them how to landscape, how to mow lawns, how to do all these different things that they could eventually make money on, vocational skills. And then he pulled them out once a week and did art and poetry with them, but still paid them. It was part of their like job. And we worked with these kids, and the change was fantastic. I still follow some of them on Instagram, and they're like this is 10 years later, and they're like amazing adults. So it was just a very cool experience. They took us into, this is a picture, they took us in to see some of the behind the scene politics of administration about where laws about drugs and other social issues get made. So this was also one of like the coolest experiences of college. So I just wanted to point that out because I'm sure wherever, you know, some of your colleges might offer that too. And it was just a very cool experience. And I think it also gave me an idea of, I really like the idea of this. I think New Orleans, they were talking a lot about like infection control and disaster management. And then with this program, I learned a lot about addiction and nonprofits. And I think that eventually, like, even though maybe a couple years later, kind of trickled into like who I am now. And these experiences like really had a lasting impact. So then after Maryland, I still was kind of like, it kind of felt like the end of high school again. I'm like, oh, I'm still not sure. And I have to go into the real world. And I don't know what I want to do. And I was still interested in nursing. And someone in public health said, if you really want to go far in public health, you should get some letters after your name. And I was like, okay. I was like, nursing school sounds like a good idea. Like it'll put off, I think it also was like, I can put off the real world for another year and stay in school because I love school. So I went to Drexel, which is in Philadelphia, for an 11-month nursing program. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. It was very rigorous, very challenging. And it was all like, whereas I had really focused on my social life in school in Maryland, I really only focused on academics in Drexel. It was so rigorous, but I'm very grateful for it now because a year later I came out with a nursing degree. And I went into nursing, and this is kind of where my career starts. I thought I was like, okay, I'm going to be a nurse and then we'll see what happens. I kind of was like, you know, my goal was just to get my first nursing job. And it was a bad economy and it took a little while, but I got my first nursing job and I went back to Pennsylvania. And what's interesting about nursing is I think sometimes you have this idea of what it's going to be. Like my idea of nursing, I didn't have any friends or family that were nurses. It actually really scared me because I wasn't an EMT. I didn't have friends that were EMTs. I didn't know anybody that was a nurse. It was kind of terrifying actually. And my only idea of nursing really had been TV before I became a nurse. And so like, you think it's going to be, you know, like, I guess like nursing essentially, like you think well, the parts of it that I didn't realize that were like, you're helping patients, but like in this picture in the upper corner, like you're alone a lot, right? Where there's you making decisions, which I didn't think I didn't think about, or the fact that there was a lot of teamwork. I've never experienced teamwork like when you have a patient that's not doing well. And the kind of connection that you get in a job like nursing that isn't, because I've done other, different types of jobs since, but when you're in nursing, you're seeing people at their most vulnerable points. I mean, at the hardest points in their life. When you're a nurse, you're seeing people, when they're having babies, unfortunately, when they're losing babies, you're seeing people, I saw, young 18-year-old kids. I worked in oncology, which is cancer, for a couple years. And that you just see, I was very young, I was 22, 23, working in like what felt like very intense environments, which I could never have imagined, right, before I chose the field, but it was incredibly rewarding and something that I don't think you can get in every career. And really felt like a nursing professor had said to me, you might not always love your job for the day, but you'll always be proud of the job that you did. And I think that was like really telling of what nursing and floor nursing is like. And I'm really grateful, kind of what happened. I was a nurse for 2 years at a couple different places. And I kind of started getting that, I'm not sure this is for me. There were parts of it that I didn't like floor nursing. I was working nights, I was working weekends. And there were parts of it that just didn't fit. It's not that any of it was bad and I was good at it. It was just, it didn't feel like the right fit. I don't know if anyone's ever felt like they did something and I'm like, oh, this isn't the right fit for me. Like something just feels like I don't like it the way everyone else does, or I don't like the way I feel like I'm supposed to. So I ended up, talking to my manager about it. I was very open. I said, I think, and she goes, well, you really love public health. She's like, I majored in public health. Like maybe you should go back to school and try something else. But I really felt really lost. And kind of, I watched all my friends and they were all going in these straight lines. They went to finance, they got really good jobs, or they went and they went right to law school and they knew they wanted to be a lawyer, or they went into business and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I really wasn't sure. So I took this kind of break and I was really soul searching, and I was substitute teaching actually, just to kind of pay my bills and get through things. And I ended up at this boarding school, this very fancy, very unique boarding school that had students from all over the world. And I ended up being their school nurse. And I say this because I would never have anticipated, but I ended up being in the elevator with the school nurse. And I introduced myself. I was like, oh, hi, I'm Jamie. I'm a substitute teacher right now and I really like it, but I'm a nurse and I'm not really sure what I want to do. And she was like, oh, well, you should be the school nurse here. And by the time we got to the 27th floor, I was supposed to leave the elevator, but I stayed in to talk to her. And by the time we were up on the 27th floor, she had sent my resume in. And I became the school nurse pretty much overnight. And they sent me to Disneyland a week later, which is something something I could have planned. But it's something that, I was at it felt like a failure, not having nursing or what I was doing in nursing not be right. And then something like very unexpected happened, and it turned out to be such a nice surprise. So I got to work with the kids and I got involved. One of the big parts of my job was infectious disease, in the sense that, so COVID now, so they have to close schools because everyone's living together in a small school, right? Or you're in classrooms that are small. You're seeing it with COVID, but there's a lot of conversation. Should we have people in classrooms? Maybe our students going to be required to be vaccinated? Should teachers be vaccinated? So these are the things that I dealt with the boarding school, because the students came from all over the world, and different places in the world have different diseases that we don't really have to worry about. We all get measles vaccines, polio vaccines, different vaccines, but not every country has those requirements. And so those diseases still exist. And these students are coming and they're not immunized. So I was doing a lot of policy. What do we require? What don't we require? A lot of their parents were from international backgrounds. So I'd have to call, and there's a lot of cultural differences, a lot of education, because how things are done in our country is very different in other countries, especially even, how teenagers handle, trying to think of something, even just like diet and exercise and those kinds of things. There was a lot. I probably learned more than anybody I worked with, which was incredible. And that was at the time, I was there for a little bit, and then there wasn't really much room for growth. And I was kind of excited to, I'm like, I want to do more of this. I love this international setting. And I ended up going, so I ended up, you know, kind of looking around and looking on Indeed, and I see an ad for the United Nations during the Ebola epidemic. And I go, there's no way that I'm qualified for that. You know, I'm young. I don't have, you know, I didn't go to, I don't have, you know, in my head, I'm like, oh, I should have this fancy degree and I should have this experience and Y experience. And I'm sure there's lots of people that, you know, went to Ivy League schools and that's, you know, they're going to be apply for it and they're going to get it. But I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose if I apply. I really, this is a dream job. I'm going to go for it. If I don't, I have nothing to lose, right? If I apply for it. So I ended up applying for the job and I got it. And the way the UN does interviews, you know, if you have an interview now things are over Zoom. But the way most interviews are usually in person, and the way the United Nations does interviews is they do blind interviews where you can't visualize the person. So there's no bias. So they can't judge you based on what you look like, how old you are, you know, anything about you, what your surroundings look like, which I think is pretty unique and pretty nice. Definitely very interesting. So I went through the interview process and I ended up at the United Nations during the Ebola epidemic. And I say this because this is back in Ebola. So I was doing similar to COVID stuff right now, working, you know, in the hazmat suits, practicing that if we had an Ebola patient come to the UN, we would have, you know, big conferences at the United Nations, and they would want someone to help plan, well, what if someone has Ebola symptoms while we're at this conference, right? In the early days of COVID, we had to worry about things like that too. Like, what if someone gets sick in the middle, you know, of class? What if someone gets sick while they're on an airplane? Like, what are all these plans? So the picture I have right here is getting, you know, hosed down in the back of the UN. I remember sitting there in that suit thinking, like, I tried out for Model UN, not once, not twice, but 3 times in high school and didn't make it. They said my public speaking wasn't, I wrote this long essay and I'm like, well, your essay is good, but your public speaking, eh. And then I like tried again. I remember like sitting in that classroom shaking and like, again, they were like, well, your writing's good, but like, we don't think like you cut it. And then I tried out again. I'm like, well, this is my year, like junior year. And I remember they went to like the national championships and they all came back with a trophy. And I was like, I didn't even want to do it anyway, which wasn't true. But then it's the day I walked in, like actually had a job at the UN. I was like, you know what? Like, I finally made it. It took 10 years, but I made it to the real thing. So maybe that's okay, you know? And I always think that's funny because I really wanted to be a Model UN back then. And now sometimes I meet with Model UN groups at different colleges and high schools. And I think it's funny because I had like how things can come full circle when you don't ever anticipate them to. And what felt like such failure back then actually, you know, turned out okay. So these are just some pictures. They sent me abroad. They let me travel, which I thought was cool. I'm kind of, you know, going to skip a couple years. It's kind of what I'm back to doing now. Again, I kind of tried some other nursing jobs, did infection control. And then when COVID happened, they offered me to come back to the UN, which is, I say that too, because like relationships that you have with people are so important. If I've learned anything in my career, it's the relationships that you build. And it might not be the ones in your job. It might not be the ones with who you think it's going to be. It's just being nice to everyone and kind and understanding. You don't have to like everyone because you're never going to like everyone. But forming some relationships and like really kind of keeping those connections has really carried through. Like I said, like I went on that alternative spring break and one of the women became a doctor and her and I stayed very close and have helped each other throughout our career. Her husband and I ended up working in similar, you know, fields and got to know each other and help each other a lot. And you just never know where life is going to take you. So even the friendships you're making now, when you're in high school, like there's some of those people are going to be cheering you on like 15 years from now and helping you in your career and helping you in life. And it's really a nice thing. Like what you're doing now like matters because it will all come full circle someday. And I think that's, you know, when I had my dream job, and I think, you know, I still have my friends from high school that were like, oh, I'm sorry you didn't make Model UN, or like, oh, I'm so glad you're finally working there, you know? So it's very nice. I just think it's something to kind of know that, you know, the people that are around you now, it might not be the people you think it's going to be, but a lot of people do tend to stay in your life, and it's very nice. So now with the UN, I do, because things are global, we do a lot of conferences. This is with the Secretary General. I do not meet with him. This is just a generic picture. But this is kind of what it looks like, meeting with people from a lot of different places, having meetings. I like to kind of show what the day-to-day is like. Sometimes it always looks like, oh, like you work in infectious disease, you're in Corona, you're in that suit. I'm like, yeah, some days I am. And some days, I'm sitting on conference calls, talking about things, and, it's pretty, every day. One of the coolest things I got to do this year because of COVID. So the United Nations has, what's interesting is most, and I didn't know this in high school, so you guys might all be familiar, but like we have an army in the US, and our army is meant to fight and like defend our country. The UN has soldiers, but they're not meant to fight. They're meant to protect the local civilians. They're meant to protect small villages. Say a program is there to give food to a small town in Africa, they might be there to make sure that no one steals that food. Or if there's any kind of like aggressive gangs in the area, they might be protecting the local people. So what we did, my job at the UN is to protect these people. They're called peacekeepers or the blue hats, which is why they have that blue hat. And my job is to keep them safe. So when COVID happened, they all live in small dormitories and barracks very close together. And how do you keep them from getting COVID? How do you keep the people that are there to help others from getting sick themselves? So it was a really interesting, we went in there, we couldn't go in person. So I would have someone virtually, we'd have them on their phone, and they would take us through, military camp like sites in Africa, and in different places, sometimes on ships, to show us like, this is what it looks like. Can you help us? What recommendations do you have? This is what we're doing. Do you agree? And just to kind of give you an idea of what things look like in other places. So we have hand sanitizer everywhere. That's not so much the case in other places. So like if you're looking here, like they have like a Gatorade bucket that you would have at a game full of Gatorade, and it's filled with water, and they have a little bar of soap, and that's it. And that might be the only thing they have in an area, which is very different where we have, all of us have hand sanitizer, copious amounts. Like water sometimes is scarce in different areas, and they really have to make do with what they have. They might have to have supplies flown in. So it's a very different environment, and different than thinking, kind of from this US mindset where we have so much. So yeah, that's pictures. That's in New York, which is kind of cool to kind of get to work with both. But I want to stop here. I kind of went through that and see if anybody has any questions. There we go. Questions about college, questions about work? Yeah.
I just want to say one thing that you touched upon, which is really great, is when you applied for the job in the UN, feeling underqualified, feeling like you couldn't get it, but it was your dream job. And one thing someone told me once was, these are kind of the ideal qualifications people want, or something like that. And so the fact that you applied and got your dream job only because you took a risk is something that for Student Alliance people, don't be afraid to fail. Always go ahead and take that risk. And now look where it can get you if you just go ahead and take that risk.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I failed at UN a couple of times, and I still was determined. And sometimes like, what do you really have to lose, right? You can't, like, you have nothing to lose if you don't have the job yet. So it's kind of, you build up in your head, but that still happens today where I'm like, oh, should I, someone asked me to do X, Y, and Z, should I do it? Like they wanted me to lead a presentation right when I started back on with like I think a couple hundred doctors. And I wanted to come up with like, oh, I don't think my computer's working, right? Because it was so nerve-wracking, right? I wanted to get out of it. But I forced myself to do it because I'm like, oh, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like it's how bad, it's really bad. They just won't ask me to do it again. But it went fine, right? And actually probably no one cared, and half the people were like, you think it's all about you, like Carly and I were talking about earlier. But I think that kind of came with time. When I was younger, I would like really get stressed about public speaking. One of the things I was gonna also talk about, my good friend calls this real talk, and he said he was a basketball player, and he had another pretty gruff basketball player roommate in college. They're both college basketball players, and he said at night sometimes they would sit on their beds like this and go, okay, real talk. And they would just kind of like tell the truth about about their day and about how things were going. So it's kind of what I wanted to talk about career-wise too. Like I think there's a lot of fear. I think everyone felt it. And I think when I was in high school, I thought no one was scared of anything. And like I was scared of everything and I was the only one. But I think everyone kind of has like the three same basic fears of like rejection, failure, and public speaking. Like I can't imagine, I think most people have those fears, maybe in different degrees. And then some people say like, oh, like, you know, I still have that. And I hated when people, I didn't like when people that were much older than me will be like, oh, I'm still scared of getting rejected. Cause I'm like, I don't want this forever. Like, I want to know that's going to go away someday. But I think it gets easier. Like the more you do it, like the more you fail, the more you're like, all right, well, I've done that before. You know, it didn't work out last time, but it went in a different direction and it was okay. And I think that's kind of like a takeaway too, that like things do get, certain things like do get easier the more that you do them. And the same thing with jobs, like not all situations work out. Like picking a major, I remember being so stressed. I changed my major like 3 times because I was so worried. But there's always space to make a move, right? Like after you graduate college, you're like, oh, maybe that was close to the major I wanted, but there's other opportunities to take a couple extra classes and explore something else or use your major towards, you know, my friend became a lawyer and was like, I'm not sure I like that, but he got a job as a lawyer in a firm that predicts the weather. And I had another friend who went into accounting, and I remember her saying to me, like, I don't really like accounting, but then she became an accountant at HBO, and she loves it because she's working, you know, on movie productions and movie sets. And another friend of mine, like it's just how everyone's path is different. He wants to be a music producer. And I remember watching him, like really, everyone was starting to like have careers and make money and get nice apartments. And he was really just like doing it day by day, you know, working really hard, not getting paid what he thought he should. But now he decides the music behind Super Bowl commercials. But it took him like, you know, a really long time of, you know, it looked very like everyone's path is a little bit different. And I think that's kind of something helpful to know because it's easy to kind of base yourself. And it's easy when you're in high school sometimes because everyone's a junior, everyone's a senior. And then once you hit college, all of a sudden you're like, well, that person's taking a gap year and not going to school for a year. And that person's going to a 4-year college and that one's going to a 2-year college. And that one's doing this and that one's doing that. And it's hard to kind of find your measure. And I struggled with that with a lot. Like, oh, my friends are, you know, doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm still doing this. But then I had friends that went to medical school and they're still in school. They're still working to find their dream job. And it's 10 years later and they're still trying to get to that point. So I think, you know, it's all varied. Does anyone have other questions or want to tell me what like careers they're thinking of? I'm curious, I'm interested. Anyone want to tell me what their dream job would be if there was no boundaries? Like anyone want to be a professional athlete, musician, artist?
Nobody wants to work.
If it were possible, I would want to own a sports team, but I think I missed that boat.
You want to own a sports team? I would. You never know.
You did not miss that boat. You did not miss that boat at all, man.
No, I don't think so.
No, not at all.
Yep.
I had a friend who really wanted to own properties, and he was working in the restaurant industry, and he was like, well, I want to do real estate and I want to do real estate. He would only eat eggs like every meal to save money. And eventually one day, like he like worked and worked and worked and worked, like never, like he always was in the same jeans and the same t-shirt, but now he like has his own business in real estate in Philadelphia, and it didn't take him as long as you would think. So I would say that dream's still on the table.
Awesome.
I have a curious question.
Yes.
So when you said when you were applying at the UN, they did blind interviews?
Yes.
So what was that like? Because for those of us who've been on interviews, it's all about the way you present yourself, right? And that's how we train ourselves, right? We talk to our parents, we talk to our coaches, we talk to our teachers, and they guide us on how to go into an interview. You know, you have to dress the part, put your best foot forward. So what was that like? I can't even imagine.
It's a good question. It was definitely different. I think sometimes you rely on like, okay, my suit looks good and my like like it's all like when you're nervous for something, you're like, you always focus on your outfit because it's something very tactical. Like, okay, I'm gonna like wear this and I'm gonna carry this pen. And like, I remember being like, which earrings should I wear? Like, I don't, will these ones make me look too fun? Will these ones make me not look fun? Like, like I have every little thing you can kind of like, I think when you're nervous, it's a way to kind of like focus on something very physical. And with this, like you're really they only ask you 3 questions. So you only have 3 questions to kind of show why you can do the job. There's an essay component before it. That's the first round. And the second round is these 3 questions. It's a panel of people on the other end. And it's challenging because when you only have, say, like 3 different questions that you don't know what they're going to be to show that you can do the job. I think it's almost more nerve-wracking than I've been on 6-hour interviews with multiple people and lots of different kind of hoops to jump through. And I think in some ways having only the 3 questions was a little bit more challenging. And then not being able to see people go like, okay, or like,
right.
Or like
No
see the facial
encouragement.
expression.
Yeah.
You can't kind of interact at all. The hardest part was at the end. He's like, okay, we wish you luck. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, it's just a standard answer. Like, they can't show any kind of favoritism. So yeah, it was definitely challenging compared to being able to kind of like feel a room or shake someone's hand. Probably how it feels being on Zoom a little bit. It's a little bit different than being in person. Not bad, just a little, I don't know, a little bit more like than you're used to.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Anybody
Anybody
have
else
any
have
other
any questions or things they want to share? I think that was really, really great. I love, Jamie, how you, it would be great, I think when I was in high school to have heard this, because I think we all thought, and I'm sure some of the students say that you had a certain path and you had to go from A to B and B to C and C to D. And, we've had other ambassadors come on and talk about this. And I love hearing it again and again. And I think it just kind of states to be a little flexible and not be so hard on yourselves. And I think you guys have a lot of pressure and it's okay to change your mind. You're young, do it now, because once, you're older, there's less and less time to have that ability to try things and to fail and to learn from it. One thing I recently told my daughter who's, 22, she was freaking out because she made a mistake on a resume that she sent out. And I said, boy, it's better to do it now when you're only going for an internship than when it's your job. So make your mistake now, but learn from it and decide when you want to do it that. So I think that was a great point. But, please, this is your time, guys, if you want to share anything or ask any questions of Jamie.
Yeah, Carla, I think that's a great point. One of the other things I was going to say, if you want some just like tactical, like concrete advice too, like one of the best things that I think I did was I called at people and asked a lot of questions, right? Like originally, instead of, my brother had said something to me, he's like, you could climb Everest, but you don't have to live there, right? Like you don't have to, like you can do shadow days and internships before you fully commit. And I wish I did a little bit of that, but I think like people are so willing to help, right? Like you're going to work so hard in the next 10 years that the future you is going to be willing to help anybody younger, right? Because you're going to be like, wow, like I didn't get here by myself. I got here from, so many other people helping me, giving me advice, guidance, helping me make a resume, telling me what their jobs were like. And then even now, sometimes when I'm interested, like, oh, what would that job be like? What does that look like? I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll find someone who has that job and I'll send a nice message. Hi, I'm interested in what you do. Can we have a quick phone call? And I would say like at least 50% of the time they're like, sure. And aim high. Like I would like start with the CEO. Like you have nothing to lose, right? Like those the one answer.
So
or yes, yeah. It's the same thing when I read books. I'll always like email or write to the author and be like, I really liked your book. And they always email back. Oh, thank you so much. Like X, Y, and Z. People are a little bit more accessible than I think I thought they were when I was younger. I thought these people, like, oh, they're really too busy or they're too that. But I always make, like, personally, like, I always make when someone comes to ask me for advice or like, how do I work at the UN? Like, that's the first email I answer because that's most important to me more than anything else. Because I remember what it was like, how hard I had to work to get where I am and how, how I was, I worked a part-time job in college. Like I had money was a huge consideration when I went to school. I didn't, I had to work all through college too. And so I had, a lot of things weren't just handed to me. And a lot of things, I got very lucky, just ended up in the right elevator in the right building. But if I can help someone be in that right elevator, like I would love to, you know, I think most people feel like that, that are working, because you want to help other people. But yeah, I really recommend reaching out. Shadow days, like most people will let you at least talk to you and say, like, remember I was thinking about doing something a while ago, and I called someone, I'm like, oh, what's the day-to-day like? And they're like, well, most of the time, like, it's really fun when you do this, kind of like say like, but most of the days, like, you're just sitting behind a computer. I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound fun at all. Like, that's not what I want to do. Like, working on Excel spreadsheets, like, that's not what I'm good at. Like, that doesn't really, you know, sound so fun. So I think that kind of gives you an idea. But other people, like, that sounds great, right? Like, if someone said, like, you know, you can, when I was in my young 20s, like, all I wanted to do was travel. So they told me, hey, we're gonna, like, the UN, like, oh, we're gonna send you to Geneva with a backpack and a suitcase full of gloves. I was like, okay, great. Like, I'll leave tomorrow. And now at this stage, I'm like, no, I like my life here. I like my routine. Like, you know, one of the interns can go. So I think, you know, it's just things change, and you can always ask, like, oh, what does that look like?
Good point. Okay.
Jamie, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
So one of the focal points that you said when you were in high school was like making sure that there was variety in everything that you did, and like kind of that like anxiety about not having that variety in your professional life. So do you think, I know you talked about like different aspects of your job at the UN, but do you think like it definitely fulfills that aspect of being able to have different varieties in your profession?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, actually. Like I said, I think everyone, like, some people, consistency is most important to them. Like, I think for a lot of people, like, they want to know what they're doing every day. I'm becoming more like that, but for me, again, variety was really important. I really envied people who knew exactly what they wanted to do. Like, I really thought that was like, wow, how lucky are you? Like, you know, you want to play piano the rest of your life, and that's what you're going to do. Like, that just wasn't, it's just not me. I have a lot of different interests. So I do think right now I do consulting. So for me, there's a little bit more instability with having multiple, like 2 part-time jobs make a whole job, right? Or like a couple small jobs make a whole job. For me, that was more important at this point in my career, but it took a long time to build that. Like, some people with, like, my boyfriend, he's like, I could not do that. Like, I want to know, like, what I'm doing for the next year and, like, how it's going to go. So yeah, for me, for the UN, it does, because I'm working at the UN. Sometimes I'm out in the field, you know, doing COVID testing, you know, sometimes I'm working with Tigger House. Like, so it's really like having the variety for me is perfect. And I have a lot more flexibility, to my day. Whereas other people, like, you know, when I worked as a nurse, you work 7 at night to 7 in the morning, you know, or 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and you know exactly when you're working, and it's very clear cut. So I think, you know, it's different for everybody, but yeah, for me, the variety is, with the UN, I do a lot of calls, I do a lot of education, but the main thing I do is write policy. So like, they want to open gyms back up in UN sites, I'll work on writing that policy. Like, what does the gym look like? Should they wear masks? Where should they put the equipment? And I love that. Like, I love that, like, thinking through, like, all the problem solving. And that's what I love. Other people, like, wouldn't want to, like, read and write all day, but I love that. And then I kind of have the, well, I'm out in the field some days too. So I kind of just decided I was going to create my own career, and it worked out. So, but it took a lot of trial and error, like a lot. I don't know if I would recommend, like, someone else like, oh, should you take my path? I'm like, I think it was right for me, but I don't know if it would be right, like, for everyone. I think that's why kind of everyone has their own journey. You can't really compare it to somebody else's. Like, I know some people now, they're like, I think I'm going to start a food truck. I'm like, I could never do that, but like, they're going to do it, and they're going to do great. That's a great question.
Well, if we have no more questions, we'll get ready to wrap it up. But one thing I think I'd love to do, Jamie, if you're okay with it, and maybe some of our other speakers, I'd like to maybe send an email to our students with all of the ambassadors, all the speakers, our contact information, what people do. And I think it would be great if you guys ever want to reach out directly to someone, because I love that idea. I think most would be more than happy to give information. So we'll put that out there to all you guys as a resource. We'll work on that in the next week or two, and just get you a listing of all the people kind of affiliated with Tigger House that are kind of willing to either answer questions for you guys or talk about what you're going through. So hopefully that'll help you. But feel free, like I said, to reach out directly if you have questions or things you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think sometimes people too, I remember everyone being like, you should get a mentor. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how to ask someone, like, will you be my mentor? And then someone once told me, you know, your mentor might just happen. Like, you don't have to formally ask someone to be your mentor. Like, sometimes I remember someone said, like, maybe your mentor is your favorite author and you've never even met them. You met them, but like, you really look to them to guidance and for like, you keep coming back to their ideas. So I definitely have like, you know, writers and other people that have been mentors at one point, even though we've never been, you know, got to meet. But I do think that, you know, my boss at the UN, like she's been a huge mentor throughout my career. And it kind of just happened, right? Like it wasn't this formal, but she's always been like such a steady resource. She really gave me a lot of guidance when it came to graduate school, gave me a lot of guidance in my professional life, was always a sounding board. And it was never anything super formal, but it really like has had a huge impact on my life. And I think, you know, in other cases, sometimes someone was a mentor just for that job, right? Like just for that job. I worked as a waitress in high school. And I remember one of my managers, I was really upset because I wanted to be promoted at the restaurant. And he was like, no, like, you know, you're too young to have this job that you want. And I remember being like devastated. Like I was always like, I was so, I don't think I've ever been that distraught for this restaurant job. And I remember like I was outside in the back, I was really upset, and he like came down, I was like sitting, you know, on top of a dumpster in the back, like really upset. My mom always told me not to get upset at work, and here I was like making a scene. And he like came out back and he like got on one knee like a dad in like a TV show and like an ABC family special, and was like, you know, like this is the reasons why, but you know, you're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and we're gonna give you a different job that I think you're gonna like a lot better and is a better fit. And he like I just remember always him taking the time to sit and have that conversation with me was so impactful and like so meaningful. And that was one of the strongest mentors I had, and it was only for a short time in the short way. So sometimes that'll happen. Like your mentors, you'll call to ask somebody a question, and then you'll call and ask them another question, and 10 years later, you're still calling just to ask a question. And sometimes a mentor can look like that. And I think that's kind of nice, where you don't really know. It doesn't have. I remember having a lot of pressure. Like everyone's like, "Who's your mentor?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I don't know what that means." But if someone had asked me, like, "Who do you look up to? Who helps you make decisions? Like, who helps you guide you?" Like, I would have had a list of 10 people. And I think that kind of would have taken the pressure off a little bit. But yeah, Carla, I think that's a great idea. I'm speaking for myself. Like, you can email me, call me, like whenever you want. I'm happy to talk about, you know, career-wise, non-UN stuff, like more colleges, like happy to have any kind of conversation. If you're interested in the UN, they do internships. I think you have to be graduated from college within 1 year. I think they have a high school program as well. But one of my students at that Le Mans school I worked at came up to me. He's like, you know, I really want to work at the UN one day. He was from Singapore. And I remember like, I'm like, you'll do it one day. I'm like, I promise you will. And I remember I got him a little UN notebook, and I was like, you'll be here one day. And I had forgotten all about it. And just recently, the other day, he posted the picture of the notebook with the note I wrote him on the inside. And he's like, she was my school nurse, and now we're colleagues. And he got a job in Paris working for the UN. Wow. And like had like gone through college, like went to political, like he really, he did it, you know, and he had went through a lot in high school. He had a really, you know, not the easiest time. So yeah, I really think that sometimes you never really know where things are going to go. So yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, get that professional sports team. I think it's possible, Michael. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Love it.
Awesome. Right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jamie. This was amazing. I really hope it helped you guys. So great to see everybody tonight. Stay warm. I know it's getting cold, and have a great week. We'll see you at the next speaker series.